Okay, so we're going to go over while, if, and else structures today. These are the toughest pieces of coding that we will do, okay? You got to have out that note sheet. You've been jotting all the stuff I've told you to write down on. Main reason why is because if you ask a question on it and I know it was covered, I'm going to tell you just to check your notes. So please do pause and write stuff down when I tell you to. Let's start. Just as a refresher, because it's going to help for our lesson today, the task main right here. This is our first code that we ever saw. It just tells the robot, hey, here's your main task. It's whatever's between these two curly braces. And you remember that these are super duper important, because if one gets deleted or if something gets written outside of the curly braces, your robot's going to freak out. It won't know what to do. So it says main task, whatever's between these curly braces. You're going to see some similar stuff to that with some of the codes we learn today. So the first one is called while. Write this down. This code says, while something is happening, do this. Okay. Now, what that actually means, or what we use it for, is we only use this while code in one way. Okay. We use it for while 1 equals 1. Now let me make this super clear. While 1 equals 1 basically means, hey, I want you to repeat a task forever. Okay? Let me show you how this looks in the program, and then we'll explain it some more. Make sure and pause and get this stuff written down. Now, while is found in the control structures section of our code, so we're actually going outside of natural language this time. So control structures, here it is, while right here. So we pull that in, and now what do you notice? It's got its own curly braces. Okay, so what I want you to do is anytime you're using a code like this, you want to tab all of the parts of it in by one tab. Okay, so look for tab on your keyboard, tab everything in by one tap of tab. It's a way to help keep organized, so you can see, okay, these are my task main curly braces. These are my while curly braces. It helps keep things in order. Okay. Now you've got a couple things you got to do here. Number one, you've got to write in the condition. Like I said, the only reason we'll ever use while is for 1 equals 1. What this is saying is while the number 1 equals the number 1, do something. Okay. So you're going to put whatever that something is right here. While the number 1 equals the number 1. Well, think about it logically. Will the number 1 ever equal 5 or 10 or 20? No, it always equals 1. Okay, so your robot knows that. It's smart enough to know that. It says, hey, while the number 1 equals the number 1, that's forever. So it's going to do whatever you put here forever until it runs out of battery or you shut it off. So, for instance, we could put in here a start motor, okay, and then you'd call out what motor you want. So let's just say right motor and whatever speed you want. If you were to start up this program, it would forever, it would run this motor until it ran out of battery or you shut it off. Okay, so you've just figured out how to make this thing, instead of just going through once and stopping, now it's going to always do this. It's going to continue to repeat whatever is in this section. Okay, so that's while. Let's go ahead and take a look at our second code. Second code is called if. Go ahead and pause and write this down. If something happens, do this. Sounds just the same as while. We use it a little bit differently. Okay? If something happens, do this. So, for instance, if we press this button, this bump switch, start the motor. Okay? That's the way we would use it. Now, we have to also use this in correlation with another type of code, which is called sensor value. Okay, so go ahead and write down sensor value quick. Now here's the way that we use if. If the bump switch is pressed, do something. Well, if you remember back to debugger, in our debugger we saw what the value of the bump switch was when we pressed it. If you remember way back when, it was a digital switch. So when you pressed it, the number 1 came up in robot C. Okay, that was the value of the sensor. Okay, so we're going to use this to say, hey, when that bump switch is pressed, start my motor, or whatever you want it to do. So let's go ahead and see how that would look. If bump switch was pressed, start motor. Let's go ahead and close up some of this stuff so it's not confusing. Under control structures, we've got if statements here. I only ever want you to use the ones that you see body next to. Eventually we'll use this one down here too. Okay, none of these 3 up top. Let's pull in an if. Same thing, it's got its curly braces, so we're going to tab it over by 1. Okay. Our if condition. So I said it's if the bump switch is pressed. Okay. So we've got to put our somehow if bump switch is pressed in here. Well, that's where our second new code, that sensor value comes in. And that's under sensors. Okay. So if the sensor value, because the switch is a sensor, if the sensor value of the bump switch, it wants between these square brackets whatever sensor you're talking about. So if the sensor value of the bump switch, and then we got to remember, oh yeah, what did it show up with when we press the bump switch? 1. So if the bump switch equals 1, notice there's 2 equal signs here. That's just a coding thing. Just recall that, but we're not going to go too far into it. If the sensor value of the bump switch is 1, so meaning if the bump switch is pressed, do whatever I say right between these curly braces. So I said that we wanted to start the motor. Once again, we can just drag it in there. Okay? And you call out which motor and what speed. Now, this thing will wait for you. It'll wait to see if you press the bump switch. Okay, and if you do, it's going to start your right motor full speed. Tell you let go of that motor, or let go of that bump switch. Okay, so pretty easy task there. The last thing we want to go through is the if else. All right, and this is just a true false type of statement. It says if something is happening, do this, otherwise do that. So it works the same way as our first if, but it's just got a alternate scenario. It's a true false. So it's this one down here. Let's go ahead and push it in. And once again, do our tabs. Okay. Now basically this is just in lieu of writing 2 if statements. Okay, because you could write if the bumper switch equals 1, start the motor. If the bumper switch equals 0, stop the motor. But we don't need to do that. We can make it more simple and the robot will still understand it. We can just say, just like we did last time, if the bumper switch, or the sensor value of the bump switch equals 1, start the motor. Give me just a second to pull all this in. Okay. And you would call out what motor and what speed. Okay. If anything else happens, I want you to stop motor. So if anything else happens other than that bump switch being pressed, I want you to stop motor. Okay, so basically what this is telling it to do is, hey, start it up if it pressed the bump switch, but if you let go, I want you to stop that motor. Okay, so that's an if-else statement. You could use this for anything you want. You could say else turn on the LED. So it starts up the motor if you press the bump switch, but if you let go, it starts up the LED. You can do all sorts of stuff with this. The crazier thing yet that I'm going to show you before I wrap this all up is we're going to end up using while in tandem with the if statements, okay? And it's going to seem crazy, like you've got so much going on, but after you play with it for a little while, you're really going to get used to it. So just work through it. Rely on how smart you actually are. We're doing some incredible things in coding here, and you're getting to the really complex functions. So let's just go through this is as complex as we're going to go. But let's just go through a tough code here, and then I'm going to let you go. Okay. This says, while the number 1 equals 1, do whatever's between my two curly braces here. Okay, so it's basically saying whatever's between here, we're going to repeat over and over and over forever. Okay, otherwise it would just go through once and it would be done. If the sensor value of that bump switch is equal to 1, so meaning if that sensor is pressed, that bump switch is pressed, run whatever's between these curly braces right here. Well, that's a start motor, full speed. So if you press that bump switch, I want that right motor to be going full speed. If anything else happens, including you not pressing that bump switch, stop that motor. Okay? So it's going to repeat that forever. So basically, if you downloaded this to your robot, not only would you be able to press the button once and let go, okay, you can do that as many times as you want, and every time you push that button, that motor's going to start up. Okay, so now we're getting some more complex, responsive sort of codes going, and this is some really cool stuff that you can make some really awesome robotics with. Okay, so I know it was a long video again. Make sure you got the notes down. Please ask if you have any questions or if you're foggy on any of that. I'm happy to help. Try out the last activity, which is while loops, if else structures. It's the toughest one yet, but you're all going to do great. Good luck.